Okay, so I know it's not a video about the nyakumis, but hey, maybe I want my quote-unquote fan base to, have stuff in a more continuous fashion. So I'm doing something about that, I guess. So I was going through the options on the website I use, and there was this woman. She's canonically referred to as a witch in this hentai game. No, I don't know the name of this hentai game. But she's called a witch. She's apparently some kind of resistance fighter. She is probably part of the good guys, to be honest, but I don't know enough about the universe. Even though it's pretty clear who's good and bad. Anyway, there's this dude, and he's got like a tentacle, prehensile and everything, with some. At the end, it's what's a phrase I can use to word this? Domey. It's like covered in domes. And it excretes a liquid that makes the woman experience more pleasure. So it's probably just a general stimulant of which, due to it going into her vagina and what is going in there, it's just making pleasure. And I don't know what this stimulant is, and as far as I'm aware, there's no proper real-world equivalent. But it's not like I go researching stimulants. I go researching things about the human anatomy. Hey, of course I do. Have you seen this channel? But the woman in the video, because of what's being done by the man, she grows a penis. In minutes. Minutes. It's like, it goes from what's clearly stated to be 10 centimeters, and then it gets huge, like, way above average. It's like, from the mounting point to, you know how in the One Health thing, I think for maybe CPR or Heimlich, there's this thing in the chest that you use to like get a bearing on location and then do stuff from there. Yeah, it goes like up to that point. It's huge. It's like 4 times the size. So what, 40 centimeters? I'm eyeballing it, so it's probably not too good of an estimate. And it's made out of maggot cells. Not maggots, maggot cells. So the cells come together. Reminds me of the Xenobots and how they quote-unquote reproduced with a bunch by being in C-shapes and then putting a bunch of cells together, even though they make blobs of cells rather than reproduce, and these blobs of cells also can't really make more of themselves. And there's no particular order or methodology as to how the cells are arranged, so it's not like they even could do much besides writhe around in nothingness. But yeah, the maggot cells, they're probably deconstructing and then coming together. There's one substance called moo glue. It allows you to glue meats together. Yeah, the maggots are probably joining the cells together with a similar protein. And it's stated that she can even get women pregnant with that penis, of which is not made out of her own cells. Which would mean that that the maggots are either using her own genetic data, so or that they have a already stockpile, I suppose, of human genes, of which doesn't make very much sense, because that would imply that the maggots are either given that or they're born naturally with that. So they're probably taking it out of her. There were vaginal juices in there. So it's obvious to see where they got it, assuming they don't take it from the blood, or from her egg cells, or from any of the tissues that the maggots go through to go from the vagina to her surface, of which, by the way, somehow the penis doesn't split anything, which straight up shouldn't happen. It really shouldn't. Because even if it goes through the living tissue and then they rearrange themselves so it's not really splitting, and it's more like when a tooth comes out, you know, an adult tooth in a human. But there's dead skin cells at the top, and they're flattened, and they don't really have much in them. There's no nucleus, and there's nothing that even viruses can use to reproduce. It's more like a wall of proteins that are in disc shapes that are conjoined than actual cells, even though they're made out of cells. So, yeah, they probably came out from the vagina and then over the top and then formed in that one spot, possibly digging down into her, of which would align with a painful feeling she acquired. But this really isn't meant to make sense with the science. I'm doing this on the fly because it's not like I have a script paper thing, and I seem to do good on the fly. Now, the second penis doesn't usually happen. Now, there's also two penises basically coming from the same spot, and the bases are also pretty thin, so they maybe shouldn't stay. But they're made out of maggot cells. These cells are not native to the human body. So, these cells are probably from the maggots, as stated, and this is going for not just the form of the penis, but also the contents inside of the penis, where rather than blood and internal pressure keeping structure, it's maggot cells. And they're probably using the same tissue that maggots would normally use to move around. Also, there's no testicles, which would imply that either the sperm is held internally inside of the woman, like what was discussed kind of briefly about the nyakumis, or the maggots themselves are functioning as sperm. And it is to note that two penises is not normal, which makes sense because that wouldn't need to form. And she also ejaculated for a particularly long time in universe. This was acknowledged within the clip of the game that I saw. In the game, the penis is shown jumping from one size to the other, of which doesn't make sense in terms of actually happening, but nothing in this really moves, so it's probably just the fact that they did happen at a constant rate, that they weren't shown throughout all of it, and this would apply to the second penis as well. But the penises are apparently at least implied to be one with the body of the host, so the maggots clearly went into her, did some integration, The maggot cells would have stuck around, kind of like a male anglerfish after they do the process for reproduction, if you know, you know. But now to get on to the process of the penis growing, because the penis starts out like a normal penis, but then all 3 dimensions bigger, and it also has different proportions and shaping. And we can see the head throughout both phases of the penis. And yes, each phase is one picture, there's no in between, and there's no prior. This penis had the head move upward, which would mean that the penis is having cells go into it from presumably underneath, and then the cells on the side of the penis, of which actually provide shape, are having new cells be put in between the pre-existing ones, in a process that is new to me. In order to get the cells in there, they would either cut open or brute force their way into the gaps between the cells, of which probably isn't what's going on, because a more efficient way would to be secrete a little bit of a protein, or corrosive, I guess, liquid, and this corrosive thing, or protein, is there to neutralize or break down a certain spot where cells meet, and then the new cell goes into that spot, and then more of the protein similar to moo glue. It's not like it's the normal process for growing a body part like this, because that would come from the cells dividing, and it would be metabolically impossible, assuming that they release normal amounts of heat during the process of building the cell. And there's nothing stated that would imply such. And also the penis came from stimulation inside of the vagina. Okay, I'm not quite entirely sure about that, but it makes enough sense. And this is the end of the video.